Welcome to a new video in my home automation series, and today I'm going to show you how you can create your WLED devices using some Zigbee buttons. And specifically, I'm going to use a Zigbee knob, which is sort of like a push button combined with a rotary dial that would allow me to, control things like brightness and color temperature as well, or colors as well. And also I'm going to use an IKEA remote, which also has all the temperature, color temperature and the brightness buttons as well. And what I managed to do is, obviously, I can turn the WLED on and off, and I can control brightness as well, and I can control the color temperature, which is, in this case, it's going to be changing the color, so moving along the color wheel. And I'm doing all this with Zigbee devices, and for that I'm using Zigbee to MQTT, which I made a video on how you can install that. So this is one of my recent videos, so if you don't know how to do that, you can watch that video as well. And I'm going to use Node-RED in order to implement most of the knowledge. So first, let me talk about this knob. So this is this thingy which you can push, and also you can rotate this dial. And if you want to use this, then you have to implement this top flow here. As again, everything is going to be in the video description as in sources to this flow. And all you need to do is, in the beginning, you have to modify the topic. So obviously, your device might be called something else, so you have to change this topic accordingly. Other thing you need to change is, in all these WLED status function nodes, there is an IP to the WLED, so you have to change the IP. Also, I am using a WLED specific function node. So this is the WLED, and if I go into the palette manager, you will see that actually there is two WLED nodes. There is a Node-RED Contrave WLED and Node-RED Contrave WLED2. So I'm going to use the first one here. And within the configuration of this, you also need to provide the IP of the WLED. So obviously you change it here, and then you change it in these places. And there are a few more other customizing capabilities or options here as well. If you open this change brightness, you can change the velocity here. That's basically, it's going to control how quickly the brightness changes. I mean, of course, with this dial, you can just spin it quicker to make changes. But again, if you want to move if slower or quicker, you can change this value. Obviously, the higher one is going to change the brightness quicker. And there is similar settings in the change color. So there is one which is called the degree. So that again tells, by spinning this wheel, how much the color is going to change. And think about the color, if you know the hue color wheel, and that's basically the degrees. So going from red all the way back to red, that's 360 degrees. So one click here is going to change the color temperature, or the color, or the hue color, by 10 degrees. And what is also going to be happening is that this script is going to set 3 colors, and those colors are going to be like 30 degrees apart. So if I just bring this up, so how it works is, I think, yeah, it is turned on at the moment. So you can see that it changes the color, this color, and also picks, different colors. So, whatever effect that you select will use these 3 colors. So the way I have implemented this code is it's not going to change what effects you use. So you select your effect manually. So as you can see, I have the gradient effect selected. And here on the colors, you use the color gradient option, because that is going to use color 1, color 2, color 3, which is picked here. So again, if I just push and rotate, because that's how you change the color temperature. So if I just do a few. So now if I do that, you can see that the colors have changed. So now my first color is yellow, and then the 2 other colors are different shades of green. So this is like, again, if you think about, well, actually this color is, so as I said, this is 360. So every click is going to change the color by 10 degrees, and then color 2 and 3 is going to be another 30 degrees, sort of like down from that color. So let me just maybe make a few moves, and if I refresh, Yeah, you can see that the color is now green, and the second and the third color is goes to this turquoise color. So that would be like, I don't know, like 30 degrees, and then 60 degrees the next color. That's all you need to change, and that's all you think. Those are the only things that you can configure. And when you operate this, as I said, if you just do a single push, you can see here that the message changes here. So that's going to turn off the LEDs, and then you push again, that's going to turn it on. And then if you just simply rotate, then the brightness changes. So that goes all the way from 10 to 255. And then if you push and change, and that's the color temperature changes. And it's going to show you the degrees for the first color. So like 0 is red, and obviously 180 is going to be this, and I guess you can figure out the rest. And that's it. This is all it takes for you to implement it. If you want to do the same with the IKEA, so this IKEA button, then you will need to implement the second part of the flow, or you can use both, just like I do. So here again, you change the option to either use, the topic. So what is the topic of your device? And again, you have the IP addresses or on the LED status nodes, and on the TV or TV LED, because it's right next to my TV. So you have the IP addresses here. The toggle status, well, there is nothing there that you need to modify. On the change brightness, you have a similar value, you have a velocity. So again, like one click on these buttons will change the brightness by 50. So if I start pressing the down button, as you can see, 120 minus 50 is 70. So that moves the brightness by that much. Again, because you need to click it multiple times, I think it makes sense if you do bigger increments. And the very same for the color as well. So here, if you push these two buttons, which is on the IKEA remote, changes the color temperature, then it changes by 20 degrees, and the difference would be 30 degrees. Yeah, that's it. And this is all it takes to implement it. So now I think I'm going to talk about how it actually works. So if you just want to, implement the node and get it up and running, that's all you need to do. And now I'm going to dive into the details how this one works. So first of all, let me open up the Zigbee to MQTT. So I have both of these devices added to my Zigbee network. So this is the IKEA switch. I mean, I guess, there's nothing new about this. You probably know this one. Probably this is going to be a cheaper option. I don't know how much it costs nowadays. This Zigbee knob or smart knob that I purchased from AliExpress, that was around $20, and I made a separate video on that. So it's slightly more expensive, but actually this dial function is nice. It makes much easier control of your LED strip, especially the fact that if you spin faster, then it makes bigger change. So I think it's good. Probably for the color change, it's you have to make some really fine changes if you want to dial in a specific color. And let's talk about the knob first. So if I open up my monitor, so we can see how the data looks like. So if you press it, you get a, sorry, I also moved it. So you press it, you get an action which is a toggle action. If you start just spinning it, you get an action which is brightness step up or brightness step down. And as you can see, the step size changes from 13 to some really high numbers, depending on how fast you spin it. And if you press it and then rotate, you get color temperature step up and color temperature step down. So these are the main actions that I need to work with. And in the Node-RED flow, after the message comes in, I basically just put it into like a big switch node. So is it a toggle action, a brightness step up, step down, or a color temperature step up and a step down? And here in the status messages, these are exactly the same for each one. I will decide whether I have a recent update of the WLED settings, because maybe I'm just going to go a little bit, because if you call the /json/state URL of your WLED, it's going to give you back a JSON which contains all the configuration options for your device. Like is it on, what is the brightness, what is the color settings, and some of the other things. And that's what I'm going to use to change anything, because I want to get the latest data from the WLED so I can make the changes. So if you are using your mobile app as well, then the Node-RED would not get notification, but it would get the update, the latest state from the device. And the reason I'm using this specific WLED node, because it has a couple of functions. So as you can see, if you just send a true or false value, that's going to switch it on and off. If you send a number, that's going to change the brightness. And if you send the exact same JSON that I have downloaded here, you can change pretty much anything else, which I'm going to use for the color. So here, what this thing it does here, this function node, is checks whether we have the WLED TV variable in the context, and also it checks at what time that was saved. So basically, if we have the settings from the last minute, then we are going to use that. And so we are just going to assume that you're all going to use the phone and also the button within the same minute. So depending on the scenario, it will either fire the HTTP node to get the latest settings, or it will just go straight into the toggle state here. And in the toggle state, I just get the message.payload.on. Actually, let me show you the data that comes through. So this is how how that JSON looks like. So it has like the on, the brightness, and some other values, a lot of other values here. And what I'm going to use is I'm also going to use the color settings from segment 1. And you see the RGB color settings here for the free colors, which is basically these three colors in here. There are some assumptions in this code. It is assuming that, again, in your WLED, you only have one segment because it's only going to update the first segment. So if you have multiple segments, then, or if you only want to update specific segments, you have to modify the code accordingly. So as I said, it's just going to turn the LED on and off, and then it always saves the new state, and then it also updates the last update. So that's the current timestamp when we did anything with the WLED. If you do the brightness up or down, then we do the same thing. We check whether we have the latest status. If not, we get it. And then we check the brightness. By the way, the reason I'm doing all these status things, because let's say if you are using the wheel and then you start spinning, maybe you would have Zigbee actions every, multiple times a second, and I didn't want to query the WLED all the time in case it might be just too slow. So going back to the brightness, for this knob, it's going to determine the velocity using the action step size. I just divided by 12. Maybe I could have divided by 13. That's the lowest number. So that will give me a number how many sort of velocity steps it counts, and then it times it by this velocity factor as well, because otherwise it would change the brightness by 1. So you have to spin like 255 to get it from minimum to maximum. I also store here the minimum brightness value of 10, the maximum of 255, and then it just updates the brightness and again sends the data and updates the message on the function node. And of course, it only does this if the LED is on. So if the WLED is off, it doesn't do anything. And then finally, I do the same for the color change, and that's going to be the most complicated one because, well, you see the code here, and it looks a little bit complicated, but actually it is not. The main code is pretty much same as the brightness. So first of all, we check whether the LED is on, and then we get the color value. So again, this is we get it from segment 0 and color 0. So as I said, segment 0 and color 0 from the WLED. And then again, we determine how many steps we have spin on the wheel or on the dial. And if we are doing color temperature down, obviously the steps are the opposite direction. So I do times -1. And we convert the color one from RGB values to the hue, saturation, and HSV. What is V? Anyway, that's the right luminance, I think. Or anyway, so we get the. I mean, all I care about really is the H value, because then I can rotate the hue color. So I just rotate the H value times by the step and the degree. And I also have a small function here, so that takes care of whether it goes above 360 or it goes below 0. And then once we have this new hue value, then we just convert it back to RGB, and then we set color 1, and then we rotate again by the difference. We convert it back to RGB, that was color 0, and then we set color 1, and again we rotate it for the second time. We convert it back to RGB, and then we set the third color option, and then we do the housekeeping. So it looks complicated, but the logic is actually really simple, and you can see in the beginning of the video that it works pretty good. So this is all you need to get this knob up and running. So the next thing is the thing for the IKEA remote. So this type of remote, which has 5 buttons. So again, if I look at the MQTT Explorer, if I push the middle button, that is again action toggle, and I have brightness down click and brightness up click. So the actions are slightly different. And then the 2 colors are arrow left click and arrow right click. And of course, we don't have a steps here because it's a single push button. So here in the main switch node, I am doing pretty much the same. I'm just using different keywords because the action has different names. But then the rest of the logic is exactly the same. So it still does that thing, whether I have the latest settings for the last minute or not. The toggle action is exactly the same, so there's no change there. The brightness action is only a slightly bit different because we don't have a step count here. So the brightness is always incremented or decremented by the velocity, depending on whether the action was down click or up click. And the color temperature is again only rotated by previously we had a rotation of, let me see. Oh, it's still step times degree, but here the step is either 1 or -1, depending on whether the left or right arrow was pressed. But then the logic is the same. We convert it to, the HSV color scheme, the original color, and then we just rotate by, I think I set it to 20 degrees here. Yeah, 20 degrees here. And again, the difference is 30 degrees. I mean, if you want more of the same colors to be used, then you would reduce the difference to, if you reduce it to maybe 10, then if you are in red, you are going to select 3 different reds, but they are going to be really, really similar. So maybe it's not going to show up as well in the WLED. So this is why I picked a larger number. But I think you can see, I mean, it looks good. So if let me see what's the current settings. So we have a couple of greens, and if I press, I have no idea which day it's going to go, but I pressed it twice, and if I refresh it again, okay, so you see it was somewhere here, so I pressed it twice, so that was 20 and 40 degrees, but now the third color now going into blue. So yeah, it's good that we have this wheel here because it makes it really, really visual how the code works. And yeah, to be honest, that's it. It's not really complicated, and of course it is really easy to make it to your own. And so again, if you have a WLED which has multiple segments and you want different buttons to control different segments, then what you can do here is that, the brightness is for the entire WLED, so you can't really change that. So the brightness is always going to do the same thing. But if you only want to make color changes to a specific segment, then here in the color change code, you can do that. So first of all, when we get the color 1, you can specify which segments. Obviously 0 is the first segment. And then whenever I am updating the values, so in this slot and this slot and this slot, again, you select instead of segment 0, you just pick whatever segment that you need. And yeah, so in that way you can have one switch to control multiple WLEDs, or you can even have multiple switches control different segments in a single WLED. Just make sure that you're updating the correct segments. And other than that, as I said, the main on-off and the brightness is going to be the same for the entire string. If you are interested in this integration, the Node-RED flow file is going to be in the video description. But I think that will be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.